Welcome to Sports Management Podcast, where you will hear interesting sports management professionals share their stories, experiences, and passion for the sports management industry. I am your host, Marcus Philipsson. Welcome to episode 88 of Sports Management Podcast. This podcast has been shortlisted for the Sports Podcast Awards in the sports business category, and it would mean the world to me if you would take 2 minutes to vote for me. It is really simple. Follow the link in the show notes, then simply create an account and vote for Sports Management Podcast. Thank you very much. And as always, we are sponsored by InSport Education, the online business school for sport. For 2023, they have created some amazing new courses and modules. As always, you get 10% off all courses, programs, and modules with the code Sports Management Podcast 10. The link is in the show notes. Now, today's guest is Eric Chaves, the Senior Manager of National Sales and Service at the PGA Tour. Eric is heading up this rebranded department, and prior to the PGA Tour, he was working for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Get ready to learn how the Netflix series Full Swing has impacted the interest for golf, how the Live Tour has affected the PGA Tour, the X and Y leadership styles, learning about yourself through leading others, his best advice for aspiring sports business professionals, the importance of journaling, and much more. Eric Chaves, welcome to the Sports Management Podcast.
Hi, Marcus. Thank you for having me. Great to be here.
Yes, and I'm very excited to talk to you. You are the Senior Manager of National Sales and Service at the PGA Tour. So can you tell us a little bit about what you do?
Yes, for sure. So our program, like the name implies, we have a sales and service team that I manage. So we have about anywhere between 7 to 9 sales associates on our team and anywhere between 2 and 4 customer service agents, so CSAs. So our customer service agents assist on the 35 plus events around the country for about 2 weeks at a time. So right now, while we're recording this, they're assisting on the Honda Classic, that's this week, and the Arnold Palmer Invitational that will be starting next week. So they're answering all of customer service calls. And then our sales associates are tasked with selling 4 to 5 of our top events around the country as well. So the Players Championship, which is about less than 14 days away now, the Dell Match Play in Austin, FedEx St. Jude Championship in Memphis, Tour Championship in Atlanta, Century Tournament Champions in Maui, and the President's Cup whenever we have it here in the United States domestically. I just kind of lead that team, and I recruit, hire, manage, train that group, and we get after it every day.
That sounds good and very exciting. And I know that this department of yours has rebranded and expanded from inside sales. So can you tell a little bit about the change and why you felt like that was an unnecessary task?
Yes. So I think, for a lot of listeners, if they're sport management students or in college looking to get into sports, if sales is a career that they want to go into, inside sales is probably the first step. That's where I started. We'll talk about it later, but with the Jacksonville Jaguars. And that's what the PGA Tour had 2013 or 2014 was inside sales. And it was strictly just sales reps making outbound cold calls to all of the events all at once. And the reason we expanded to sales and service was that in the recent 1 or 2 years, a lot of our PGA Tour events have gone to a mobile ticket platform, digital tickets. And, it was a little bit tough for the event staff on site to handle all of the phone calls coming in. Hey, I can't find my ticket, or I lost it, all of those things. So we added our team here from headquarters. We're headquartered in Ponte Vedra Beach, Florida, right by TPC Sawgrass. So our team out of headquarters now assists with answering all of those customer service calls. So hence the name Sales and Service. And then the sales team kind of downsized a little bit. So after COVID, we were down to about 4 sales reps. And then we just found that sweet spot of supporting 4 or 5 events. 12 was maybe a little bit too much. So we kind of downsized to about 6 to, like I said, like 7 to 9 sales reps. So the sales side of things has almost remained the same, but we added the service team to assist with the digital tickets and mobile tickets from the tournaments across the country.
I understand. You put the national sales and the customer service in the same department under you.
Yes, it was a rebrand and an expansion.
I understand. For the listeners that might not know, when you work with sales at PGA Tour, what is it that you sell?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when I was working here at the Jacksonville Jaguars, I was unaware that the PGA Tour had an inside sales program. And even after I did find out, I was like, what do you guys do there? But we are mainly focused on corporate hospitality spaces. So if you watch on TV, you'll see that around the marquee holes, the 17th, the 18th, all those holes, you'll see like those white structures, those chalets and those suites. That's mainly what we focus on, is trying to find new business to bring in revenue for our events and selling through those corporate hospitality spaces. So one interesting thing about our program is that we focus mainly on B2B selling for probably 80-90% of the time. And we kind of have a model similar to like SaaS sales, software sales, where our sales reps are almost like SDRs, and their goal is they're on the front end of the sales process, shooting out a ton of emails, LinkedIn notes, all these things, trying to get in front of decision makers to set appointments for the senior sellers at all of those events, to hopefully, for them to see the value in investing in a corporate hospitality space. Does that make sense? It's kind of convoluted.
No, that makes perfect sense, and it's very interesting. And I just felt like that wasn't clear to maybe everyone for what you do in the sales department at the PGA Tour.
Yeah, I think that is an important thing, as the kids are students in sport management, again, that are looking to get into the business side of things and sales. Is to ask those questions that may sound simple, but like, what are you selling? Who are you reaching out to? Because not every program is the same. Some you're reaching out to mainly individuals that came out to 1 or 2 games, trying to upsell them to a mini pack. Others are more business focused. So it is important to ask those questions, and every program's a little bit different.
Before we get into your career and how you started out in sport, I would like to talk a little bit about golf in general.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a couple of days before this episode that we record right now, it was the Netflix series was released, Full Swing.
Yes.
And I saw that in the UK, it was the top 4 streamed series on Netflix.
Great.
So after just a couple of days, how have you felt that this has impacted the interest for golf?
I think it's been pretty tremendous. And we've gone on sale with a couple tournaments earlier than we would have in the past, just to take advantage of this momentum. And I think it's a great story. Yesterday was President's Day here in the US, so I had yesterday off, so I was able to catch up on 3 episodes. So I'm still on episode 4. But no, it's been great. And I think the cool thing about golf is the PGA Tour is a true meritocracy, right? So it's like you have to win to make money and keep going up, right? So I think hearing the stories of these guys, that I just watched the one on like Brooks Koepka, of a guy that, from the outside, you're like, man, this guy's got it all together, and like, he's just a workhorse. But even him, during the time that they were showing Netflix, when they were taping it, he was struggling, So it's kind of interesting to see the behind the scenes of how much pressure it is on these guys week in and week out to make it. And I think that'll help the viewers kind of understand the human stories behind the game, and not just watch, a Saturday, Sunday where a guy lifts the trophy, but there were some guys that missed the cut and didn't make any money and had to go home, and that's the game.
Yeah. I think I'm on episode 4, or I maybe finished 4. The last one was with Joel, the one who always talks himself down.
Yes.
Yeah, he's one of the best in the world, and he said all the time, "Oh, I'm the worst, I'm terrible, I'm never going to make it." And then he almost, end up winning a tournament here and there. So
yeah, and that's the beauty of, and that's why that's why I kind of agreed to, even do this podcast. It's like, it's almost just like 2 people talking, and you hear the stories of like, everyone is going through something. Even Joel's story, like I didn't know a lot of that about himself and his mother. And again, from the outside, you just think like, oh yeah, they have it all together. But once you really dig in and you learn these stories, man, everybody's got something that they're going through, or some barrier that they have to try and figure out. And that's the beauty of life. You have to kind of enjoy the crappiness every once in a while.
Yeah, for sure. And you see how mental it is. Like when someone has done a couple of good rounds, then you see them, like the confidence is boosting, and then as it goes a little bit worse, and then you see it right away, it affects their mood, and that's what, the champion level, to be able to overcome those type of periods and just keep on going.
Yeah, it's very, very mental. I would assume, or I would hope that all of those guys have a mental coach, because that's, especially at that level, like it does, they're all very talented, but it does come down to the mental aspect of it. So it's really, really interesting. I hope I get some more time to watch the rest of them.
Yeah, I hope so for myself as well. I think there were
Yeah.
eight episodes, so we have a couple of more to catch up on.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the episodes of Full Swing highlighted the Live Tour and that they started last year. From the PGA Tour side, how do you feel like the Live Tour has affected the PGA Tour?
Yeah, I think, obviously a lot of these answers and conversations are above my pay grade. So I'll let, Jay Monahan speak to it whenever he's making announcements. And there are, I think some lawsuits still ensuing with that. I think the main thing that I'm getting out of all this, and even like through COVID and through challenging times, is in my position. And I think, again, for kids that are just starting out in sports or anything like that, you focus on you control the controllables, and then you have to have trust in leadership, right? So I think for us, if I were Jay, I would hope that everybody in this building is going as hard as they can in their current jobs and focused on that and not being distracted by it. And that's what we do day in and day out. So that's what I've learned is, with all of the distractions that are come your way in any business, there's going to be competition. You do your job the best that you can to the best of your ability. You lead your team, you inspire them, motivate them. And then you put trust in the people that are making the decisions at the top. And it's not just one person, it's a whole team. And you keep moving forward.
If we're looking at your career, you mentioned it briefly a little bit before that you worked for the Jacksonville Jaguars, but can you tell us a little bit about how you started out in sport and your journey up until today?
Yeah, for sure. It's quite it's not a traditional path, which is, it's somewhat common, I guess. But I graduated from University of Central Florida in 2009 with a general business degree. And then my first internship was with the Washington Nationals with their spring training. How I got that internship was simply by, at the time, UCF had a great sport management program. I wasn't a part of it, but I should have been if I was smarter back then. But I reached out to Dr. Bill Sutton, who was, kind of a legend, and now he's at University of South Carolina. So I reached out to Bill Sutton because he was very well connected, walked into his office, and literally was a 4-minute meeting. And he got me in touch with somebody with spring training with the Washington Nationals. That was my first taste of being in sports. After that, I moved up to West Virginia, which is where my father was living at the time, in Morgantown, West Virginia. I applied to their sport management program with Dr. Dallas Branch. I thought I crushed the interviews. I thought I did really well, and I didn't get in, and I was a little bit devastated, and I didn't have a backup plan. So then I went to Teamwork Online, which is where most of the sports careers job postings are. And I found the Major League Soccer. They had a national sales center in Blaine, Minnesota, just outside of Minneapolis, where you'd go there and you would do 45 days of intense sales training. And then you would interview with an MLS team, and then you would go there. So I sent in my little video for the interview thing. I got into the second session of MLS. This was back in 2010. And packed up my Saturn Ion and drove from Morgantown, West Virginia to Blaine, Minnesota. And I was there for 45 days. And that was really my first taste of actual cold calling and selling tickets and all of that. And I was not great. I was middle of the pack. I was always nervous to make cold calls. It was tough for me, but I was doing a decent job. After that program ended, so this is where the story gets a little bit more convoluted. I'm originally from Brazil. So after that time, I moved back to Brazil to live with my mom, my brother, my grandparents. Just a time that I thought I won't be able to do this later in life. So I spent 4 months down there in Brazil. When I came back to the States, I met a girl, but I moved back to West Virginia, stayed there for a couple of years. And then once she graduated, we moved down to Jacksonville. And that's where I started with the Jacksonville Jaguars in 2010. There's a lot there, but that's my story.
That's a good story. And if we stay at the Jacksonville Jaguars, what was your role there?
I started in their inside sales program. which, they typically hire a class of about 8 to 10 kids, usually straight out of school or minimal work experience. And the program, is about a year long or until the season ends. And you just have to grind and hope that you're, number 1 or 2 in revenue, or that you're doing something special to have them keep you. And that was my goal. I was like, I love these kids that I'm working with, but there's no way I'm not going to earn a position here. So I wasn't always at the top of the revenue board, but I just tried to do other things that kind of made me stand out from others, just bringing good ideas to the team and working hard and being a good team player. So I did that. I was inside sales for a year, then got promoted to senior inside sales representative to assist with the new kids coming in a little bit. And then the goal of inside sales is to make it to kind of like an account manager or account executive position. And that's what I was able to do after about a year and a half. And then I was in that account manager position for about 3.5 years or so. And all that means is you're basically doing a little bit similar stuff to inside sales. It's just now you have a book of business, so you have to renew accounts. Season tickets basically is what we were selling. And then, you ask for more responsibilities, which I think is important as you go throughout your career, is just asking for more. So I helped with interviewing the new inside sales kids coming in. And then I managed or helped interview and hire our sales and service interns at the Jaguars for a little bit of time. But that was kind of my path there at the Jags.
Very interesting. So, you mentioned that you're originally from Brazil, and I know that you speak Portuguese, Spanish, and English, so three languages. So has that helped you anything in your career?
I don't think I've been smart enough to utilize that, because it has. And my Spanish, I will say, is very conversationally limited. Obviously, being from Brazil, I'm fluent, but have a thick accent. So now if I go back to Brazil, people are very like, "You're not from here." I'm like, "No, I am. I think I moved to the States when I was 9. So I don't have much of an English accent, but if I go back, I have a Portuguese accent. So it hasn't, if we get the one-off where we have a Brazilian client calling in to get Players Championship tickets, I can help them. But I think later down in my career, maybe that's something that I need to put more time and effort in. And we do have some tournaments in Brazil with the Corn Ferry Tour here and things like that. Maybe I need to look into.
Yeah, I think I've been trying to learn Greek since I lived there for a couple of years, and my fiance is Greek, but it's very difficult to learn a new language.
Yes, especially this later not that we're late in life, but when you're a kid, it's unbelievable, because I moved here to the States without speaking any English in 3rd grade. It was a summer of 3rd grade basically, and I think after like 6 months that summer, and I went into a straight English speaking school, like I could speak English after 6 or 7 months. And now, I can barely remember my passwords on my computer.
Yeah, well, as a kid, you're usually like a sponge to these things, especially languages and other skills as well.
And Greek, man, that's a heck of a language.
It is. And just to figure out the alphabet first, all the different letters that they have. To pass that one, and then you need to pronounce them.
Start with an easier one with the same alphabet.
I should. Considering your different managerial positions, how would you describe your leadership style?
One thing that I read, like when I started, so this was my first managerial job, right? Coming to the PGA Tour. So when you make that leap from full-time seller to management, it's overnight. You go from being like a solo, producer to like, now you have a team and you're basically like a sales trainer. You're responsible for this team, the culture and the attitudes and all of this stuff. So it's a huge jump. And I don't think everyone that's a great seller, like number 1 in sales, should really go into management, because it's so different. You have to learn that like not everybody does the same thing that you would like to do it. So you have to learn a lot of different styles. But for me, I think my basic instincts so far have been right. And one thing that I read, once I got into management, was that there's 2 types of managers. They label them as Theory X and Theory Y. Have you heard of that at all?
No.
So it's I recommend people to Google it. But like Theory X is a little bit more like, like parent-child, right? Like it's like, if you don't do this, I'm going to punish you. People don't really want to be here. This is just work. They're motivated by money only, and just do your job, get the heck out. Theory Y is a little bit more developmental, empathetic, I think, understanding that not everyone is motivated the same way. And that's kind of my style, is that theory Y, I guess. And I didn't know that. I read it and I was like, oh, this articulates what I've been thinking. And, you have to hire the right people too. I think that would fit that style. So I think when you're hiring, you kind of have to look at like, almost like, to use an American term with like football, Coach Belichick at the New England Patriots, they draft people and they put people on their team that's going to fit their style. So not everybody fits your style. So some people that come work for me maybe wouldn't do great at another place. So whenever I hire, I kind of try to look for these things of kids that are like kind of have this intrinsic motivation, good people, because that kind of tends to work well with my style of managing.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And the first thing that you said there with that maybe the top salesman maybe shouldn't be a team leader or a manager. That's very interesting. And I feel like I've noticed that in some companies as well, that it's such a difference of being a leader and just being a great sales rep.
It's different skill sets, and not saying that it's not possible. It's just somebody gave me an example. I was talking about this with somebody else and they gave me the example of Michael Jordan being in the front office or a coach or something. It's like, I don't know. I don't think that's going to work, because they're like, why aren't you working as hard as I used to? I was in the gym all the time. Like, this is all I love to do. And not everybody's like that. So, but I think that's one thing that companies are starting to get right a little bit, is starting to do some kind of like leadership training during a sales rep tenure, to be like, hey, because there are different tracks you can go after sales. You can just keep selling for the rest of your life and keep growing a book of business and make a lot of money, or you can go the management route. And I think it's better for them to figure that out before they get into it. So I would encourage more companies to do like, hey, as you're an account manager, we have this, management development series. We're going to put you in some meetings. We're going to see, show you what it's really like to manage a group. And then after 6 months, let us know if you drive with that or if you don't, because it's a huge mistake when you put somebody into a management role and then it doesn't work out. Then it's a sticky situation, and then go from there.
My assumption is that you learn a lot about yourself when you are leading others. Would you agree with that?
For sure. There's a great book. This guy, his name is Brett Ledbetter, L-E-D Better, B-E-T-T-E-R. And he focuses mainly on sports, on college coaches. Like, he basically helps out teams. So he's helped out Duke, like at UNC, like any big time program. And he talks about Bill Belichick a little bit in that. And what he says that Bill Belichick says is this quote that is, if I want my team to blank, then I need to blank. So if I want my team to be present, then I need to be present. So that's why Bill Belichick is always like, hey, we're looking at, in all the press conferences, he's like, we're thinking about the Raiders next week. We're thinking about the Raiders next week. That's what he wants his players to be, not thinking about whatever. So 100%, these last 3.5 years that I've been here have been honestly the best for my career, because I'm not preaching, but I'm saying some things to the kids of our team. And I'm like, man, I don't know if I'm doing that. I need to do that. Right? Like, I need to read more. I need to be on time. I need to keep a journal every now and then. Like, these are the things that I'm sharing with the group, but I wasn't necessarily doing. So it's been one of the most rewarding things that I could have done. I never would have thought that I would have gotten this much out of it, but it's been, you learn a lot about yourself. And I think the other thing is self-awareness is really, really important. So getting feedback from your teammate, from the people that you're leading, is really important. This guy, Brett Ledbetter, has another quote that's, you can't read a label from inside the bottle, right? So you kind of need other people around you that you trust to tell you like, hey, here's how I think you're acting, but here's how people are perceiving you. And that's a big part of our program too, because we're hiring kids straight out of college. So sometimes it's their first job. So it's like, hey, this is, self-awareness is really important, is how other people see you, how you see yourself. The bigger the gap, the worse that is. The smaller the gap, the better self-aware you are. But that's something that I've learned, or I'm continuing to learn while I'm a manager.
That's great. And on that topic, So that was some good advice and also a book advice for maybe managers or aspiring managers. But what would be your advice for young people with aspirations to work in sport or who maybe just started working in sports?
So getting your start in sports it's all about the intangibles, right? So one thing is it's listening to one thing that I wish I would have done is just listen to more like podcasts of like sales leaders now and see what they look for, right? Like, and I know we're promoting your podcast, but there are other good ones out there too. But like there's one called 52 Weeks of Hustle by Travis Apple that I think is great. He interviews vice presidents of ticket sales and you hear about what they're looking for when they're hiring, what they did to get into the industry. The other one is Lance Tyson. He's a sales trainer, mainly in sports. And he's got a good podcast called Against All Sales Odds. And he interviews my former boss, Chad Johnson, on there. And he talks about what he looks for in hiring. So like, it's like a cheat sheet of like, okay, these are the things I need to do. And this is, but really when you're hiring for entry level, there's no resume that stands out more than others because it's not like we're hiring for like a rocket scientist and you can show me the last rocket that you built and if it worked or not. It's basically like, do you have the intangibles? So everybody's different. I think what people need to do is just go a little bit above and beyond just posting a resume on Teamwork Online and hoping for a callback. So the simple things that you can do is utilize LinkedIn, make sure your profile is professional and that you have more than 12 connections on there, reach out to a lot of people, but find out who the hiring manager is or find out who the current, I wouldn't reach out to the hiring manager directly. I would reach out to the people that work under them, right? And then find out what it's like to really work there. If you make a good impression on those people, they're going to send the hiring manager a note and be like, hey, I chatted with Marcus the other day. Seems like a hungry kid. He's a junior in college now, but he's looking to get in, he saw our job posting and he's looking to, but he came ready to learn because then that's a much better referral basically. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is just having kind of tenacity of reaching out to a lot of people. My first job with the Jaguars, I went to their roster on jaguars.com and found the emails of every front office person. And I emailed all of them. Chad Johnson was the senior VP at the time. He was out of office. I got his out of office back. So I waited until he was back in the office, sent him the same email, which now I still have that email. I look back, I'm like, man, this was 8 paragraphs long. It was way too long, but it just showed that I was really interested and I was willing to go above and beyond. So those are the main things. Listen to podcasts, do a little bit of research, reach out to people that are currently on the team or have worked with that person in the past, because those will be your best referrals to get an interview.
Yeah, I agree. And I really like the last one, that you go like one level below and see how it is and what they feel about it. Maybe it's a more honest response you get from except for someone who is like the hiring manager.
Exactly. We had a real life example. We had a kid on our team. His name is Jack Loneman. So he found on my LinkedIn, I posted a list of our alumni, people that came from our program and are currently selling in golf space across the country. And it shows where they are in a list of the 30, 35 alumni. And I think he reached out to something like 12 to 13, 14 people before he talked to me. So I was getting all these emails from our alumni, like, hey, I talked to this kid, Jack. He seems like a good kid. Hey, I talked to this kid, Jack. So I was like, man, this kid is really hungry to get after it. So I hope that, if anybody is applying for our program, that they listen to something like this and then they go in and they like, hey, Eric, I heard you on this Marcus's podcast and this is what I'm doing. Because if you just post a resume and wait in sports, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, I agree with that. And LinkedIn is great as well. That's how I get 95% of the guests on this podcast. As you say, like if you are, you're polite and you're reaching out and you tell what you want and being clear, give some examples, then most people are willing to at least listen to you.
For sure. And that's a lot of people in sports, that's how they started. So I was given an opportunity because other people gave me their time when they didn't have to. So same thing, of course, we're willing, not everyone is going to do it all the time, but it's like sales. You reach out to 100 people. If 62 get back to you, that's great. 62 more people.
Yeah. Has there been any bumps on the road in your career? And if so, how did you overcome them?
Bumps on the road. There's a lot, especially working in sales, Marcus. I think the biggest bumps on the road have, for me, and this is just the way that I think, is that I'm a I'm always thinking about the future and kind of worrying a little bit about like what's coming next instead of being really present. And Steve Jobs had that commencement speech in Stanford. I think it's 2005, but it's on YouTube. It's a great speech where he tells like 3 little stories. But one of them is about how you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect the dots looking back. And that's easier said than done because you are always trying to think about the next move and things like that. So for me, I think it was the time that I was at the Jaguars after that 5 years, being an account manager for 3.5, 4 years, you're like, man, what am I, like, I'm just doing the same thing every year, right? You hit your goal, start at 0, hit your goal. And like, for me, that's not the way my mind works. I was getting a little bit like, this is getting too repetitive. And that was a tough time for me, I think. And I guess, and it all worked out, right? So it's like, I just worked as hard as I could, looked for opportunities, made good connections with people that worked here at the tour. So then that eventually got me here. So the bumps on the road for me have been more about that, about kind of worrying about the future a little bit too much and not focusing on the present. And boss Chad Johnson at the Jags talks about this, like, all you have to do is focus on your current job, do that to the best of your ability, and then things will open up. No one comes into a company being like, I want to be CEO in 10 years. And that's not how it works. You go in, you work as hard, you make that program better than how you found it, and you keep moving it forward, and then things work out. But easier said than done, because even now I'm like, what am I going to do now? So, yeah, it's tough. It's tough.
Of course. I think it is important also to, think about the future, but also to stop and celebrate the successes that you've had on the way, and also, of course, learn from the past. So, take in all of the past, future, and the present.
Yes, for sure. It's, life is a balance. It's a push and pull. My favorite book, it's a business book, but it's called Tuesdays with Morrie by Mitch Albom. It's my favorite, and he talks about that. He just gives like life lessons, but talks about how everything's a little bit of a push and pull in life, and there's no one way or the other, and you're kind of learning. You're never perfectly balanced. Balance is always one way or the other. But I think it's taking everything as it is, and what we talked about in the beginning. It's like enjoying the moments that aren't perfect. But again, easier said than done. So one thing that's been helpful for me too is journaling. When I got to the Jaguars, when I was in inside sales, I wrote in a little journal for the first, I think, like 2 or 3 months that I was in there. And I'm so glad I did that, because now I look back and I can see how much growth there has been and how uncertain I was about the future. That's why journaling is great, because you can look back and be like, man, I was worried about that then, and now here I am now. But I highly recommend, I tell that to our reps here, and again, it's something I need to do more of, but journaling, doing all that stuff. That's why I agreed to do this podcast too. I'm going to love to listen to this 2 years from now and be like, what the hell were you thinking saying all that? or no, you were on the right track. So
yeah, that's a good one. And journaling, that can be a good advice for young people in the business as well, to, write down their thoughts and their progress and have something to look back on.
Always do that. It's really important to have the perspective is one of the best things, because you always feel like what you're doing now is the first time, or unique, or crazy. But then you look back on your notes and you're like, this is the same thing I went through 3 years ago. I can handle it.
We have spoken about your career, your current role at the PGA Tour, leadership, and some good advice. Is there something I haven't mentioned yet that you wanted to bring up?
No, not really. I really enjoy the conversation. I love this stuff. I think it's important for, I think this is a podcast that I think is meant for, kids that are trying to learn more about the sports industry, and the people that you interview are from all different industries and countries and stuff. So, kudos to you for starting it and doing it and having the research done and asking good questions. Because as you see, people are willing to take their time and talk. So hopefully, there's a sports management kid out there that's listening to all of these and learning, and then trying to pick a path of where they want to go. I think one thing that I forgot to mention is, like, when you were talking about advice for kids, like getting started, is make sure you pick a path. A lot of times I'll talk to kids that we're recruiting where they say, hey, I just want to get my foot in the door. I'm willing to do anything. And I get that. I get why you're saying that, but we're not hiring for a position that's called anything. Right. We're hiring for a sales position. We're hiring for customer service. We're hiring marketing. So make sure you reach out and you understand what different departments, what they do, and then pick a lane and go 2 feet in. It's probably not where you're going to retire from, but go straight into it, see what fits your personality, rather than just saying, hey, I just want to get my foot in the door and then see what's out there. Like, nah, that's not a good answer. So anyways, that's one thing that I forgot to mention earlier.
Yeah, that's a good one. And also I think that's what like internships and stuff are for during your studies. Maybe that if you don't know exactly what you want, you just try, do a month here and there and see. But when you apply for a job, as you said, then it needs to be more specific.
Yes, for sure. And that's why I think internships are great. Volunteering is awesome. Like just email people. Like all of our golf tournaments across the country need volunteers, and we have interns, and just shoot them an email, shoot them a LinkedIn, show up to the clubhouse, be like, hey, I'm willing to work for nothing. I'm just trying to gain some experience. That's how you put yourself at the top 1% of applicants, is when you show that like, hey, I'm going above and beyond and trying to learn as much as I can. Like, hey, I did operations at this tournament. I don't want to do that. That's not what I want to do. Great. Now you learn and then you move on. So internships, volunteer work, I highly recommend it.
Me too. Before I let you go, the last question that I ask everyone is, if you could choose the next guest on this podcast, who do you think I should talk to?
Tiger Woods would be great, I think, to have.
He would. Will you set me up for that interview?
I'll text. No, I love this question too, because it's a sales referral question, and it's interesting if there are any salespeople listening. Always ask for a referral. I think, I don't coach it enough, and we don't do it enough, but just ask, is good. But no, I thought about this. I have maybe 2 people in mind. One guy that I worked with at the Jaguars, him and I started together in inside sales. His name is Ben Krakauer. And he's got a cool career path where he went to sell the new stadium at SoFi in Los Angeles with Legends, and then he went to the New York Islanders, and now he works for Live Nation, Ticketmaster. So pretty interesting career path. And then the other one is my former colleague at the Jags. He's still at the Jags, Sean DeBrow, who's was their inside sales manager and is a senior manager now there at the Jags. So I was trying to think of somebody with hockey, because I know your background's a little bit in hockay, but if I come up with someone.
But you had one that you had Islanders, so that was the hockey.
Oh, yeah, there you go. Yeah.
That's 2 great names. And 3 if you include Tiger Woods. Let's see if we...
That may be a little tougher.
I'm sure. Eric, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time to be on the Sports Management Podcast.
Marcus, I appreciate what you do, man. So thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Sports Management Podcast. Please hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on any upcoming episodes. Also, feel free to leave a comment about what you thought about this episode. If you want to get in contact with me, send an email to sportsmpodcast@gmail.com or hit me up on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram @SportsMPodcast.